Corbett, who has an important question. He writes, a bunch of people that I have a continuing argument about 9/11 with, and specifically WTC Building 7. Sorry, that sentence is incorrect. Okay, anyway, they claim the building came down due to structural damage to the building from the North Tower. I'm enclosing a picture that does show damage to the corner of WTC7. My argument is that from the picture there's no evidence of structural damage, and secondly, if that was the cause of the collapse, why didn't WTC7 come down that morning? And since the damage to the building was asymmetrical, then why did the building come down symmetrically 8 hours later? Finally, if structural damage did bring down the building, then why was it not given as the cause in the NIST report? Okay, a very important question, as I say. This is important because this is something that it's an old canard that continues to come up. But I think the key point is what you mentioned at the end of that question, Art, which is that this is not in the NIST report. The NIST final report was released in November 2008. And I'll put a link into the press release so you can go and download the report itself and watch the video presentation that NIST gave at that time. But the key sentence from that press release about the final WTC7 investigation is, quote, heating of floor beams and girders caused a critical support column to fail, initiating a fire-induced progressive collapse that brought the building down. It was fire that, according to the official story, brought the building down, not the structural damage. Ultimately, NIST concluded that structural damage did not have anything to do with the actual initiation of that collapse. So that's an important part of this because, again, people will bring up that photo. Still, it continues to circulate, even though there are questions about that photo. And I will throw a link into a 9/11 blogger thread about that photo and debunking that photo. Unfortunately, every single photo in that 9/11 blogger thread has since been removed. It's 7 years old. All of these files have been deleted, or they're old or out of date, or the links aren't working anymore. So unfortunately, this is another thing to keep in mind about the web, is that just because it's up on the web today does not mean it will be up on the web tomorrow or 7 years from now when it might be useful. But anyway, at any rate, I was on that thread 7 years ago. I do remember it, and it certainly, at the time, I remember they showed the comparisons of different photos of WTC7, etc. And the 25% scooped out photo is at the very least an optical illusion that's generated by some of the smoke that's going on in that picture, and at very worst an outright forgery. So at any rate, we can talk a little bit about the history of that photo and how it was used. I'll put in a link to 911debunkers.blogspot, which talks about that claim and how it was first posited in Appendix L of the 2004 Progress Report on WTC7. Shyam Sunder mentioned it in the Popular Mechanics debunking article in 2005. It was eventually retracted, and now it's not even mentioned at all in the NIST final report. So that goes some ways towards telling how important that structural damage was, i.e. not even NIST claims it was important. So that's the first thing to bring up to your friends. NIST doesn't say that had anything to do with the collapse. Secondly, I think we should look at what NIST actually does say brought down the WTC7, the fire-induced collapse. And a couple of things to say on that. First of all, please remember that the model that they used to model the initiation of that collapse, and the model itself is just ridiculous when you look at the visualization of it and expect to believe that somehow explains the full progressive, beginning at freefall gravitational acceleration collapse of the building. It does not go any way towards that, I think. But at any rate, the data behind the model is completely 100% classified. Literally classified. The public is not allowed to see it. And once again, this is a point I make in the 9/11 conspiracy theory video. I'll throw the link in here as well to the actual response that NIST gave to a Freedom of Information Act request for the data that went into the building of that model, in which they say that it might jeopardize public safety if the public know about what data they used in that model. Therefore, NIST will not release the data. So that model is worth exactly what goes into it. And since we are not allowed to see what magic pixie dust went into the back end of that model, it is worth absolutely nothing. It tells us nothing whatsoever about the collapse of that building. So for a true really in-depth investigation of what NIST claims about WTC7 and why it's a lie, I will wholeheartedly recommend the work of Kevin Ryan, who has really done the yeoman's work of really dissecting the WTC7 report and really exposing it for what it is. He did an interview on the Mind Renewed podcast recently that I'll link people to, which is, I think, a pretty good conversation about the claims about the WTC collapses. And I will also include a link to a pretty comprehensive 1-hour video presentation of Kevin Ryan's presentation about the collapse of WTC7 and what NIST claims about it. That, again, it's pretty thorough, and it goes through it point by point, and I think does a very good job of debunking some of that the NIST silliness. I mean, it's just there are stronger words to be used, but let's keep this family friendly. So, yes, absolutely, 100%, there are good arguments to be made why NIST is full of it on WTC7, and the structural damage has nothing to do with it, even by NIST's own investigation. So again, a very important question, especially coming up to the 9/11 anniversary, where these types of questions will probably be kicked around once again. But moving on